We've looked previously at how we can solve a quadratic equation such as this one by completing the square. We're going to extend that method a little bit further to look at how we can solve an equation such as this one by using the same method. And the only difference is that instead of 1 in front of the x squared term, this equation has got a number other than 1 in front of the x squared term, and in this case 2. And I'll just mention that we always want our quadratic equation in this form as our starting point: ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So it may take a little bit of rearranging to get to this start point. Now you should be familiar with the method that we've used for solving a simple quadratic equation by completing the square, and also looked at how we have completed the square of a more complicated quadratic expression, and they're in 2 previous videos that are on our YouTube channel. That's to make sure that I'm not jumping too many steps at this point in time, which will just confuse you if you're trying to learn too much. Now I'm going to start in just the same way as when I solved this simple equation by completing the square. I'm going to get this minus 7 out of the way onto the other side, and I'm going to do that by adding 7 to both sides. And this just makes life easier for me on the left with this quadratic expression on the left. This is the important step now, the new step. I'm going to look at the number that's in front of the x squared term, it's 2, and divide the whole of the left and the whole of the right side by this number 2. And this does something very important. When I now simplify the left hand side, 2x squared divided by 2 results in just x squared. Minus 4x divided by 2 is minus 2x. And we'll keep this as a fraction. We want to stay away really from decimals, so we'll just keep that as 7 over 2. And you'll see that that important step has given me a plain x squared term, which allows me now to proceed using the method that you should be familiar with. So in other words, I can use something that I already know. So I'll do just that. I'll start with my bracket, look at the number that's in front of the x term, minus 2, and halve that and write it in. Finish off my bracket by squaring it, and then I'll look at this number, square that. Minus 1 squared is 1, so subtract that number, and now I've written this left side in completed square form. And this is something that you should be familiar with from previous videos. Ultimately, I'm always looking to get the x on its own on the left, so the first thing I can do is add 1 to both sides to get rid of this minus 1. And then there's an additional step, and this is where, unfortunately, with maths it's building layer upon layer upon layer. You've got to be familiar with how we add fractions and mixed numbers. So I'm going to write this out as a fraction. And 1 plus 7 over 2 is just the same as 9 over 2. And again, if you're not familiar with that, we need to look at revising how you deal with fractions. I will then undo this square term by taking the square root of both sides. Oops. And remembering that when we undo a square, we need to take the plus and minus, and finally, to get the x on its own, I'll add 1 to both sides. And we're done. Could simplify this a little bit more, but I'll leave that for another day.